Yo, what's going on? Tim Blast here, and in this video I'm gonna explain to you how to take your metal song that sounds like this to sound like this. Alright, let's get it going. Alright, let's get it started. So, the song we're working with today is called Fatalistic by the band called Taro. They do deathcore stuff, you know, juicy riffs, punchy drums, mean aggressive vocals, all the good stuff you want to hear in deathcore this day and age. So, before I begin the video, I just want to explain that. I'm going to show you all the plugins I'm using, why I'm using those plugins, and I'm going to try to explain, hopefully without babbling, exactly what you're looking for when you're mixing and mastering deathcore or like death metal, modern metal music like this. So in this video, I'm going to have chapters. You know, you can go anywhere you want. You can skip this crap right here. You can go to guitars, drums, bass, vocals, SFX, mastering, and hopefully you can learn something. Okay, so as you can see, it's pretty simple. We got guitars are in green. They're quadruply tracked. So I believe guitarists, they tracked with 5150s and rectifiers. So one of them is a recti, as you can see in the name right there, recti, and then another one is going to be 5150. And then the basses are in this purplish color right here. What happens with the bass, there is a MIDI bass happening, as well as the real bass, and we're just gonna blend them both together. The drums are in red right here. The drums are MIDI, but they were recorded via one of those like Roland electronic drum kits. So even though it's MIDI, but it's you know, it's quantized here and there, but it still has that natural feel. All right, the vocals are right here in blue, and purple, and pink. Vocals are overdubbed. We have highs, lows, all that kind of stuff. And then everything goes into group tracks. That's how I mix everything. So, okay, so let's start with the guitars. Usually when I get project like that, I would put it all in, as you do. I'll pan the guitars left, right, left, right. So as you can see, it's panned already. And then what we do next is turn the mastering compression on right here. So what that does, it's gonna glue the mix together already. And you should always try to start with the mastering compressor. I use Shadow Hills from UAD, Universal Audio. I just use the mastering loud PGM preset, and then I kind of like tinker with it here and there depending on what sound I'm looking for. So let's listen to the guitars. Let's see. All right, so what can we tell from this, right? So guitars sound a little bit too raw. They sound like they're boxed in. They sound like they need to be more up in your face. They sound like they need maybe a little bit more high end and a little bit control on the lower end. So that's what we're gonna do. So what I usually do is, so you see guitars are quadrupled. It's 4 channels plus a little SFX channel right here. We're putting them in a group channel, and we'll start with controlling the low end of the guitars. So let me show you what it is. Let's go to a part where they're chugging it. Let's see. All right, so what happens here is when people are chugging those low strings with palm mutes, right? There is this unhealthy low end buildup that needs to be controlled. You don't want to completely cut it out of the track. So that's where your trusty multiband compressor comes in. I'm using C4 from Waves, and without the compressor, it sounds like this. So you can hear how this low end is a little bit too nasty. It's going to mess up the mix. It's going to drive the volume of the mix down. And by turning this on, it helps to control it. Yeah. Now what we're going to do after that is even control more low end, right? So we're going to cut out the anything below 60 hertz. Well, I have it at 59 for this. So this is without it. This is with it. So you can see when I click on bypass, it turns yellow, so that means it's bypassed. When it's in this like dark gray color, it means it's on. And this is how the low end just sounds by itself. So you can probably, you need headphones for this to hear it, or like really good studio speakers. This stuff right here, even though like it could kind of sound cool by itself, but in the mix, man, it's horrible, because it's gonna drive all the low end. Everything is gonna be muffed up. And then I'm cutting a little bit of the mids at 469 hertz. This cut was made basically most likely when I was mixing it all with the entire band. So let's unsolo everything and listen to it within band. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna mute the vocals for now. So as you can see, this was kind of messing, this frequency range was messing up with the drums a little bit. These kind of decisions, honestly, you just have to actively listen to the mix and then look for stuff that's messing with the other instruments. All right, so let's go to 9.5 ozone right here. Nothing crazy, just another EQ, boost up the low end right here a little bit. Again, cut out the mids at 500 hertz a little bit. Same thing, just doing a little bit cleanup. One thing I did is I added a little bit of a high end. All right, so this is with it. This is without it. So as you can see, it cleans up the mix a lot. It adds a little bit better imagery. What we're doing here is we're expanding the high end of the guitars. We're controlling the low end a little bit more. Like we're making the low end to be more in the center and then the high end to be more spread out. So the track imagery is a little bit better. All right, so now we're gonna go to another fab filter right here. It's another EQ. Same thing, cutting low end, cutting the chugs again, cutting the high end. So it's all about scooping up the guitar sound. Then we have another EQ, that's another scoop. The reason why I'm doing multiple EQs here, because I mean, you could technically do it all in one EQ, but I kind of like to compare. So for example, like I'm done with this EQ, right? Like I like this, the way it sounds after this EQ. But I'm like, you know what? Maybe I can do a little bit more. Instead of like adding more stuff to this, which already sounds good, I'm making another instance of the fab filter and then just doing another scoop. So this is without it, right? This is with it. All right, so as you can see, everything sounds much cleaner. The guitars have better high end, controlled low end, and they're pretty much ready to be mixed with the rest of the song. So once again, this is with all the effects right here. This is without effects. This is with effects. The volume goes down a little bit, but it's all good because you'll see how mastering is going to help bring it all up together. Okay, so we're done with the guitars. Let's move on to the bass. Okay, so let's look at the bass. What do we got with the bass? So let's solo it right here. So as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, right? So we have our MIDI bass right here. One is the, let me unsolo it, solo this right here. So one is kind of like a little low end bass. Then we have the like more natural sounding. Then we have a real bass, which is more like a low end as well right here. And a more cleaner version of it. So why blend in different types of basses, right? So just for the meat of it, I would say it sounds much better. It sounds more coherent. It sounds bigger when you blend in different types of basses, right? So all these things are, it's basically 2 tracks, but they're split into 4 tracks. So because this real bass, it was just recorded on 1 track, but it's just using different processing for it. So this one has more distortion. This one is a cleaner. And when you put it all together, it sounds beautiful. Yeah. So what do we have here, right? So this, I'm going to start with a real bass. They all have pretty much the same plugins on every one of these tracks. I'm just going to go quickly about it because there's not much of explanations to do. It's really just compression, carving out the sound of the EQs and whatnot. All right, so we'll start with Fab Filter Q3. I'm going to turn on my MV2, which is a boost, just so we can kind of hear it more. So this is just covering out the sound, right? From this. It's a little bit dirty. This makes it cleaner. Easy Mix is our compression and boost. Now we have a stereo enhancer, which is turned all the way down to 0, which kind of helps it to keep the bass in the center of the track. Then we have another Fab Filter, carving out the sound a little bit more. Channel strip, add in drive, a little bit saturation. Another Fab Filter, destroying those annoying frequencies. So let me show you this right here, right? So listen to this frequency. That was definitely annoying in the mix. And then this one right here. Like, yeah, you definitely don't need that on the bass. And then we're just cutting the low end right here, which is like those scratchy pick noises that you don't really need. And then controlling the low end. All right, so C4. So this, what this does is kind of what it did with electric guitars as well. It's controlling the upper mid, just so it doesn't get too much out of control every time there's like a pick noises or like too much slapping or scratching happening, stuff like that. All right, SSL compressor. I don't know why I say compressor when it's a compressor. All right, there we go. So this kind of helps to keep it more uniform, like, so the sound is not bumping up too much, and like we don't want to have dynamic bass happening, especially in metal. Like you want to have the bass audio table to look like a freaking square, just like you don't want to see dynamic spikes on the bass. And lastly, we got another Fab Filter, just carving out more stuff. Let's listen to this, what this does. So this is pretty much controlling the low end and whatnot. So if you listen to it by itself, it almost sounds like we're killing the bass. But no, because we have 4 bass tracks, I kind of have to have all these scoops to control exactly what kind of sound do I want from 4 of those tracks. So let's listen to 4 of them together, right? Yeah, see, there's a lot of low end happening already. So let's go to the group track and then start turning these on, right? So this is more carving out. We're cutting a little bit of a mid here, just so we can have space for the guitars. Then we have another easy mix, bringing out actually a little bit of mid of high end, which is great, and adding in more compression. Then we're going into the UAD territory. Let's go right here. Where is it? There it is. All right, there we go. This is my bass tone from the UA 610B. So what this does is pretty much just adds a little bit of a character to the bass, a little bit of a drive. So without it, right? This is with it. Just adding a slightly more low end, slightly more character. And then my favorite plugin of them all, UAD Little Labs Voice of God. So let me show you the difference that it does. So this is without it, and this is with it. What this does, it adds this magical low end to the bass. It puts it all in the center. It doesn't spread nothing left and right. You crank up the frequency to, I don't know, like 9 or 8, and then amplitude to 10, and that's it, you're done. Like, I don't know exactly what it does, but it adds a beautiful low end, and no other plugin can really do that. All right, so then we have another fab filter, cutting out the high mids, just to make more space for the guitars. Another fab filter, cutting the low end a little bit. And then we got the last fab filter, controlling the sound. So let's listen to the bass with everything bypassed. So you see how it's a little bit chaotic. It doesn't have a body, it doesn't have the structure, but now let's turn everything on. Boom, magic. There we go. That's how it works. All right, so we're done with the bass. Let's roll straight into the drums. Let's look at this right here, right? So as explained in the beginning of the video, the drums are samples. I'm using Superior Drummer 3. What I usually do is I will break down the drums in 2 sections, right? We'll have the bass drums, snare drums, and toms in one. And then we have all the cymbals in the second one, right? So, and then I would also have mixing for every separate channel happening inside the Superior Drummer 3. As you can see right here. So usually this is the kit that I've been using pretty much on all of my heavier records for, I don't know, the last, like 3 years or so. And I try not to touch it a lot. So usually what I touch is the faders. So for example, for this song, I was touching faders for the kicks and stuff like that. I was messing around with the cue. Snare, I leave it alone because the snare samples are amazing in this right here. Let's listen to it. So let me listen to the, there you go. See, this sounds great already. Let's turn on with the drums. I mean, there's not really much to explain really around here. So they're quantized. So let me put it to like 64th or so we can see. Everything is semi-quantized. As you can see, like the velocities are jumping around a little bit just because they were recorded, with a electronic roll-in kit. So even though this is MIDI, it has a natural feel Let me go to a part where it's a little bit faster. Yeah, drums by themselves, they're great. The only thing I'm adding, so for cymbals, I'm just adding a little bit of a correction right here to the high end. Compression. Just because it's metal, you want to have it a little bit more smashed. And my favorite reverb of the all times. Well, it's an echo chamber reverb, but whatever. It's Capital Chambers from Universal Audio, just to add a little bit more brightness and, you know, magical feeling of the cymbals. For the bass drums, we add, once again, my favorite plugin of all time, the Voice of God from Little Labs. Just to add some beefiness to the low end. It does magic, I promise you. We are adding a Fat Filter Pro Q3 EQ once again. As you already figured probably that Fat Filter is like my favorite EQ, just not because you can see what you're doing, but also it's just, I don't know, it's so easy to use, and then you can just listen to the frequencies that you, it's like, I know a lot of people swear by the EQs where you like turn the knob and then you listen to it, blah, 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 and then you turn the knob. But just so you can visualize what you're doing, and then you can see what frequencies are kind of weird here and there. You can solo frequencies like this. You can move it around. You can just do whatever you want to do with it. It's like, it's beautiful. It makes the work so much easier. All right. So, oh yeah, to explain what I'm doing here, I'm boosting the low end on the snares. So snares are more noticeable. Hear that? Boom, boom. And then I'm cutting these little clickety-clackety sounds from snares and bass drums. The reason for this is so the guitars have more space. And then, so when vocalist is doing his high screams, there's space for them actually. Like, so the drums are not overcompensating, you know? I'm cutting a little bit of high end on the bass drums. Here, let me actually solo just the bass drums. Here you go. Same thing, just clickety-clackety. Doesn't sound good together with the song. It might sound good in your track, but in this track specifically, just because the guitars are so, you know, full in on the higher frequencies, like I want to have space for the guitars and whatnot. And plus, the cymbals are occupying most of the high frequencies anyway. All right, so everything is here, right? Boom, boom, boom. Let's turn this off, turn this off. Let's go to the drum group track. We have Ozone. Nothing crazy, just equalizer and another compressor. Equalizer is basically cutting the ultra low end, cutting some low mids and whatnot, and that's it. This is turned off because I didn't want to use it. Dynamics here, just giving it a little bit of a boost, a little bit of a limiter, just so the drums are more smacked together. So let's listen to what are we doing here. Oh yeah, another thing that I mentioned. So guitars and bass, generally you can kind of mix them by themselves, like when you solo the things. I mean, it's still a good idea to mix everything together, but at least with the guitars and bass, you can carve out the sound with the EQs and whatnot soloed. Drums, it's generally better to mix with the whole band playing, because you can easily mess up the drown sound. So this is with it. This is without it. See how it's like boomy? Now it's controlled. All right, let's move on. Then we got a little bit of more EQ carving. Just basically cutting that low boominess, just so the bass have, like this space right here is occupied for that bass sound that hits you in your stomach when you listen to it in the car. So basically all the subwoofer stuff is going to go like right here. So you want to make sure bass guitar has that space, but also bass drums and snares also occupy that space. So it's this little dance you have to orchestrate, you know, between who gets the space when and where. So in this song, since this is what I would say like a slower song, even though it's really catchy, it's really groovy, but it's on a slower side. It has like that power to it. I want to make sure that the kicks are like, you know, like the kicks have power. I want to make sure that the bass has power. I want to make sure the guitars are aggressive, and of course the vocals are gonna fit in. All right, so that's it with the drums. I mean, yeah, we're almost done, man. So far, just to summarize stuff, we're done guitar, bass, drums, right? The holy trinity of metal music. As you can see, it's all about, it's super simple, but it's also, you don't have to like overcomplicate stuff. All I've been doing here is EQ carving, compression, a little bit of limiting here and there, and that's it. Like, there's nothing else happening. There's no special effects. There's no special crazy shit that, you know, is pretty much unnecessary, because you want to keep the sound raw for deathcore and death metal. You don't want to overproduce it. Okay, vocals. Let's unmute this. Vocals is probably going to be the most complicated thing of this mix. Generally, because there's so many more tracks. There's different takes, there's different timbres. So, for example, there's a main track that's more like a scream guttural, you know? Then we have highs. Probably this is going to be a better example of highs. Right this down. Then we have our lows. I believe, yeah, this is lows. Then we have other type of lows, which is insane. But no, yeah, this is a special effects right here. And that's pretty much it. I mean, you know, there's a lot to work with, right? So most of these tracks, they have nothing on them. The only thing that has any type of effects is our special effects track. And it just has a little pitch shifter, fab filter to cover out the sound. We don't want to have too much stuff happening here. Like right here, for example. It sounds kind of silly by itself, obviously, because it's like a monster yelling at you in your nightmares. But in a mix, it sounds fine. See, sounded cool, right? Sounded nice and aggressive. All right, so let's, we're putting all the vocals, all of this stuff, right, in our vocal group bus tracks. All right, so let's mute this for now. And I usually try to, same as drums, I usually try to mix vocals together with the band. Sometimes what I will do, I will like boost the vocal volume a little bit up so I can kind of hear more. So let's see, without the plugins, what it sounds like. Never mind. In this case, I'm going to boost not the boost, but take the levels out a little bit. There we go. In this part of the track, just because there is 12, not 12, what is it, like 16 tracks happening at the same time, it's going to be loud as hell. But let's listen to this right here. Right out of the door, I'm adding the reverb, which is my Capital Chambers reverb. It's coming out of my effects track. This is it right here. This is basically my go-to preset that I use pretty much on everything. It has really beautiful low end, really beautiful high end. It's not overwhelming. And then what I'm doing here is I am using a parallel sidechain compression with the vocals. So what this does is it turns down the reverb when the vocalist is screaming his stuff, right? But then it turns it back up when he's done screaming. So it gives you a perception of there's more reverb happening, but it cuts down the reverb when the actual lyrics are coming out. So it's not like overwhelming the mix all the time. Alright, so as you can see, the vocals sound a little bit too harsh. They need to be controlled. You know, the monster has to have a leash on it a little bit. So we're gonna add a de-esser. Yes sir, de-esser. It's easy to explain what de-esser does. It erases your sounds, right? So, and it also controls the high end a little bit more. I don't have that much of it. I have, let me see, how many percentage is this? 43. Which is not a lot. I mean, some people just boost this up to 70 sometimes. It all depends on the vocalist. It all depends how, like, for example, my own vocals and the way you can kind of hear how my S's are coming out a little bit too much. I would boost my de-esser to like 65 or 70. Easy. And then we have compressor. This is already controlling the vocals more, so let's solo the vocal track. Silence reigns. It fills the head. See what it did? It just controlled the vocals. Like, it just put the leash on the vocals already. Like, it's not out of control anymore. Then we're gonna add a little bit of EQ carving. My favorite thing to do when mixing and mastering. Just carve out the sound. You know, you were just like my boy Bob Ross used to say, just like, have happy little trees, carve out the sound. Happy little carvings right here. So we're carving out the high end. Where's the vocals? There it is. So let's solo this, right? So let's just listen to what this is doing. Yep, so as you can see, it's carving out the high end right here. All the annoying frequencies. Most importantly, yeah, the low end rayer. This is very dependent on a vocalist. It's like you can copy this, right, and copy and paste it on your vocals, and it's gonna sound like trash. So I'm telling you, it's like you gotta really listen to annoying frequencies, like see what really annoys your ears when you're mixing it, and like what doesn't sit with the mix in total. So, for example, let's turn this off, right? Okay, so this is with it turned off. So, quick active listening, right? What it showed us, the vocals are a little bit too harsh. They're coming out too strong. I can still hear more low end. I don't like the way high end sounds like. Hence the carving, EQ carving. See, now it's more controlled. All right, so now we have a little bit of more easy mix happening. This is just compression limiter, nothing crazy. Ozone, we're adding more dynamic EQ just to control the high end right here. There's a certain parts of the song where, especially what this helps with, is when the high overdubs kick in. Since the high overdubs are basically panned all the way to the left, all the way to the right. Well, not all the way. What is it? 80% to the right, 80% to the left. Sometimes they get to sound a little bit too overwhelming. So that's why this helps right here to control it. And you don't want to cut those frequencies out completely because that's going to ruin the vocals. So that's why I have this dynamic EQ happening only when the highs come in. All right, so now got a little bit of compression happening, nothing crazy. Another EQ, boosting low end here, boosting high end. And now another favorite plugin of all time comes in right here, called Punish by I was going to say a band called Heaviosity, no, by a company called Heaviosity. What this does, it adds compression, saturation, transients, and equalize. And I don't have transients on because transients are pretty good already in the track. All right, let's listen to what it does. So this is without it, right? This is with it. Yeah, so just basically more saturation, more compression, so everything sits and glued together. Since we have so many different takes, right? Like it's not like when you have a single take and it's just like one scream happening, then you probably wouldn't need that much compression. But since we have so many different takes, like there's always 4 takes happening at the same time, you kind of want to have it glued together because otherwise it's going to be out of control. All right, now this right here is my another, yeah, this is like a mix down, basically adding a little bit of treble right here, adding a little bit of a glue. Then we have 2 more carvings. The first one is cutting more low end, adding a little bit of a high end, like high mid. Second one, cutting the low mid, just so the drums, the bass drum, snares, and bass guitars have space for it. All right, see, that sounds perfect already, right? Like it sounds so much better than we started with. All right, so we're done with vocals. We got special effects and mastering left, so let's just go to that. All right, so special effects and mastering. Special effects usually is your extra booms, your boom drops, synths, and stuff like that. That's what I have of special effects. In this track, honestly, the only thing we have is this little boom right here in the beginning of the track, and then it happens again with like the heavy part comes in. It just adds more impact to when the drop happens. Now, the reason for 2 of them, right? So I have the low, and then I have this little metallic sound, right? The reason for that is because if you just have the low, it doesn't have that crazy impact. But if you add something on top, like a crazy cymbal or like metallic or a gong or something like that, it just adds more atmosphere to the drop. You can't really notice it if you listen to the track by itself. But see, you don't really hear that ding, but it adds more volume. Like this little ding adds more volume to the drop, and it just kind of, with all the compression happening, and all the glue happening, it adds more impact. All right, so we're done with the special effects. The only other thing is a pad right here. Nothing crazy. It's just a pad to like add to the glue sounds. Let's see. All right, let's go to the mastering. All right, so this is where the song becomes absolutely aggressive and groundbreaking, and this is where all the magic really, really, really happens, to boost your volume, to boost your sound. All right, so we got everything turned on, right? Let's see. It's not turned on with the guitars. Bum, bum, bam. All right, so let's go to the mastering. So we already started with what do you call it? Mastering compressor. You know, nothing crazy here. Shadow Hills is just doing its own thing, right? And remember how I said to mix with your mastering compressor, because if you would have had this off and you would have mixed the entire song without your mastering compressor, you would most likely have a lot more mid going for you, a lot more trashy frequencies. You probably have a very uncontrolled high end. But just because we already had our glue settings turned on, you were able already to hear like what frequencies need to be controlled more. Hopefully that made sense. All right, so then we're cutting the low end right here a little bit. Generally speaking, don't do it too much. I'm only cutting for like the 21 hertz right here. What happens here, we're going to bring those frequencies back, but just because we're going to go into a compressor in ozone right here, if we have those low frequencies after the compressor happening right here, they're going to slam the track even more. Because what happens is if you have too much low end happening, it messes up with the volume perception of the track, right? So how do you listen to music, right? Like you perceive volume differently than what it is on paper. You know, like if you listen to certain EDM tracks or certain like pop music, they always sound a little bit louder, right? Even though on paper, like you can see that the frequency wave, like the audio wave, they're the same with metal. But just because metal have like more elements happening, you want to control the low end, and low end is what really disturbs that volume perception. So that's why I'm cutting anything less than 20 hertz and mastering right here. Generally, you would do like 10 hertz, but since we have a very, very boomy bass happening and a very boomy bass drums happening, like I gotta do 20. All right, so ozone. We go into vintage compressor, which also compresses the low end, but like it does it in a better, like more beautiful way. So let's listen to it. So this is without it. This is with it. So see how adding, compressor here, some slight EQ here and there. And then what this is a tape simulator. I'm only adding like a little bit of a drive, cutting out the bass a little bit, and then nothing else. Like the harmonics, this stuff doesn't really even make a difference, to be honest with you. So you can see how this stuff just glues it all together even more, and then brings all the good elements that we carved out with all the EQ that we've been doing in the mix out like in front in your face. So that's why I'm telling you that carving out with EQs more and more and more is very, very needed for this type of music, because you don't want to have mess happening with your metal. Like you want to still hear bass, you still want to hear drums happening, you still want to hear the vocals happening, you still want to hear the guitars. If you're doing black metal, shoot, yeah, just put it all in and then crank up the compression. It's going to go, and then that's it. Like that's your black metal. But no, but for deathcore, especially like modern deathcore, modern death metal, you kind of want to hear all the elements happening. Then we have an imager. So what this does is just basically putting all the low frequencies in the center. So this is all of our low frequencies right here, right? Then the mid frequencies are a little bit more spread out. So this is our mid. So basically, this is kind of like where the guitars are and vocals are, right? And then high end is like cymbals and high end of the guitars and vocals. And they're spread out even more. All right, so then now, this is where the controversy happens most of the time when I'm talking to my fellow mixers. Gullfoss. Gullfoss is an AI, I'm sorry, not EI, AI, AI equalizer. So bypass, right? With it. Ooh, so you heard how it opened up the mix even more, right? So let me turn on the limiter so everything sounds even more louder. Limiter, we're just adding 4 dB of gain, right? Nothing crazy. Modern style, 5 seconds look ahead, so it can kind of see what's 5 seconds ahead of it, so it can adjust itself. Slow attack, somewhat mid-release, right? And that's it. Transients all the way up. Release of the channel link is down because we're not even using it. So as you can see, everything sounds beautiful, right? So if you turn down the Golf Foss, it's gonna sound like this. See, so it's not really adding too much. I mean, you can kind of see what it's doing. So it's just as from like the visual perspective, it adds a little bit of a tiny bit of low end, tiny bit of high end, cuts the mid a little bit. So it adds the scoop, but it also opens up the mix a little bit more. And you can hear the details even more with this. All right, so now last touch right here is our fab filter. Last carve. Before it goes into the limiter, we're just going to cut a little bit, like the 10 hertz, as I said. Like this is what I do before the second compressor comes in right here. 10 hertz. But in this track, I'm cutting it this before the limiter, right? So just cutting the 10 hertz off the low end just to add more boost to the volume. Then adding a little bit of boost. So these little changes is what I've done as my pretty much like final revision of the mix. A lot of times what happens is like, you'll do the mix, you do the master with the band, and then they will come back and like, oh, you know what? We feel like the mix is a little bit too dark. So this is where you come in the mastering, and you just add these little tiny little notches to the master at the end to open up the mix, because you don't want to start like remixing everything, right? Like adding, I don't know, like when you think like too dark, right? So you think, oh yeah, let me add more high end to the cymbals, right? But that's not gonna fix it. It's gonna make the cymbals sound more clicky, right? You just want to do it in mastering. This is what mastering EQ pretty much is, right? You don't want to overdo it. You just want to add a little bit. So let's just see what happens here. So this is without it. This is with it. Yeah, so nothing crazy. It just opens up the mix a little bit more, adds a little bit of a high end. And why I'm doing the 2000 hertz right here is because the guitars were a little bit too dry-ish. So this is where the guitars shine. Yeah, 200 hertz is like a great way to boost the high end on your guitars. And now the 540, 5,400 hertz. That's to boost the high end of the drums. And then we're just boosting the entire, everything after 7,000 hertz. So see, instead of just boosting your cymbals, you can just boost the entire track and it sounds much brighter. It has more definition. Silence reigns, but yeah, this is pretty much it. I feel like I covered everything. So let's just do the last overview, right? So start with the guitars. That's how I usually do it. Add the bass to it. Carve the EQs around that stuff, right? Then add your drums. Whatever samples you use, just, again, carve your EQ around with bass, drums, and guitars together. Then add your vocals on top. Vocals are very complicated, so try to make sure your vocalist sounds good. Try to control the recording. Like the way we did recording here, we did it in my studio. I have a vocal booth, and it was beautiful. Like there's no external reverberation happening. There's, no external sounds happening, so everything is nice and clean. And then add your special effects and whatnot, synths and whatnot, put it all in the mastering. The way I do it, again, is I do it all in one project. And you're pretty much done. It takes time to learn what exactly you need to do. But I feel like if you keep practicing, if you keep working on your EQ carving, you'll be good soon. So yeah, thank you for watching. Please go check out this track by Taro. It's called Fatalistic once again. I'll put their stuff in the description of this video. Check out their stuff. I got some metal stuff coming out soon too, so check that out as well. And, like and subscribe, I guess.